yes, as you can see, this is Intro to Web Development. I'm Liz Tiller, developer, instructor, cat lover, and my obligatory cat photos. These are 4 of them. That is Shadowcat with the Get Shit Done mouse pad. I just love that picture. She looks so cute. That is Hopper, who is a furry flightless dragon / murder goblin, as my husband recently called her. She's special needs and likes to bite. And then the one with the fluffy belly is Gizmo, and that is Gadget behind him. And Gadget's favorite person is Gizmo, and Gizmo thinks he's a person. So it all works out. And yes, I call them persons in my household. Okay. So tonight we are going to be, if you want to code along, you don't have to, but tonight, if you would like to, we will be using glitch.com. So Glitch is an online development or online collaborative, let me see if I get it, collaborative platform for creating and sharing websites. So rather than a lengthy setup and making sure everyone has the correct tooling and everything installed, all you need is a web browser, and you have an editor with JavaScript installed. So I recommend, if you want to, even if you don't want to code along, I recommend going to glitch.com, because I will be sharing in a little bit a starter that will be getting a project that's like 50 to 75% done, and we will be finishing it up while learning a little bit about web development. What's also really great about Glitch is that it'll instantly put your work on the internet. So if you come back and watch this video later and code along, or if you do it tonight, you can send a link to your friends, your family, whoever you want to, strangers on the internet if you wanted to, and they'll be able to see what you've built tonight. And so also, if you know about GitHub, you can export this to GitHub if you would like to after tonight. And it's really fun. We'll kind of walk through it in a little bit, but I just wanted to recommend that everyone goes on to Glitch and either create an account or sign in with one of the existing options. I believe it's GitHub, Google, and a couple others that you can just basically log into. So, what is web development? Why are we learning it? Very basically, it's developing websites for the internet. It is working with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to build content on the web. And HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the 3-layer cake that makes up most content you see on the internet. So we are going to be learning a little bit of HTML, a little bit of CSS, and a little bit of JavaScript. I'm going to show you first what we will be a finished product of what we are creating tonight. We are creating a quarantine fun jar. So this isn't too fancy. We're gonna make it a little more fancy as we go. But this is, I got this idea from a podcast I was listening to where her and her partner put 3 activities each into a jar, and they shook it up, and then they were able to randomly pull something out, and that's what they decided to do during quarantine that day. So they put in things like play a game, put together a puzzle, play music, paint, do something, you know, go for a walk, I think a spa night, things like that. So the idea is that you're not just sitting in front of a screen. Well, I went, who needs an actual jar when you have the internet? We can just build one. So here we can put in as many options as we want. We can learn to code. We can paint. We can play a board game. All of those. Give me 2 more. What are people doing? Lounge in the pool if you have a pool.
Drinking.
I don't.
Lots and lots of drinking.
Yes, there has been a lot of that going on in my household as well.
Just to be funny, learn React with TypeScript.
Oh, yes. I have been learning React with TypeScript on the job. And that is not always easy. TypeScript, if I can even spell it. So now I've added all my options in here. And now I select a random activity, and it says my activity for today is lounge in the pool. I have a hot tub, so I can kind of do that, but you know, I also have a kiddie pool. You don't know. You could pretend that your bathtub's a pool. But if we wanted to, if we said we really couldn't do that one for some reason, we could do a puzzle. And as you see, it's just randomly selecting one. So we are going to go to this website, glitch.com/ and then it's the tilde, I believe is what that one's called, SDG-May-20-crash. So I'll give everyone a little bit of time to go to that. And you want to make sure that you're logged into Glitch because like I said, when we go to this page, you'll be able to remix this and I'll walk us through those steps and then you'll have your own copy of this. It basically clones it for you. And it's really great because it just means that we're going to get to personalize these for ourselves. Oh. Okay, is anyone having trouble? Has everyone gotten to it that wants to get to it? Oh, I can actually, I'm being so stupid. Catherine, can you post that in the chat? There must be a way. Where is it?
I can pull it off your presentation slides that you sent me and throw it in there.
Perfect. There we go. Okay, perfect. So that actually makes it easier. You don't have to worry about misspelling everything. Like I said, it's kind of long, but I wanted to be very specific because I have a lot of other projects on here. So you should be on a page kind of like this. Yours will not say edit project, I think. I think it'll be like view source or something like that. But you can show it, and we'll get to that in a second. But I want you to go all the way down past this README, and you see bottom right, it says remix this. So you're gonna click remix this all the way down at the bottom of that, the bottom right after the README. And I have now.
For us, it says remix your own.
Yes, sorry, remix your own. So now, as you can see, it's given it Heavy Little Carpet is now the name of my thing. But you'll each get your own.
And
If you want to, I think yours is going to be in light mode. And I can quickly show you if you want to change your theme, you click up where it gives you a name and it says project options, and you can change it to light mode or dark mode. I joke that as a developer, any developer who uses light mode is a monster. They're not really monsters, but dark mode's so much more fun. Okay, so we have the README. If you want to, it can tell you a bit more about Glitch. I believe it even tells you at some point somewhere in there how to put this on GitHub. But we are going to start with, we have assets, which is where we can upload images. We have an image uploaded for right now. It's the SDG logo. Later on, if you want to, I'll show you how you can put your own image in there. Don't worry about this environment variables. Ignore this one. Don't touch it. And let's start with HTML. Okay, so it'll be index.html is the full name of it. So we're going to start at the very beginning because it's a very good place to start. And we're going to start with HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And I like to think of it as it's the skeleton of the website. I like to think of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript coming together to make a body. And so the HTML is the skeleton. It's where all the content is. And when you start looking at HTML a lot, you'll see that the HTML tags they all start to kind of look similar a little bit. Like when you just look at HTML files, if you're not looking at the actual text that's being put into the content, a lot of it does kind of start to look the same, which is why I say it's kind of like the skeleton, because you could hold up skeletons in front of me and I'd be like, it's a skeleton. Whereas, you know, someone who knows it, they're like, oh, this person broke their arm when they were 3 years old or something. I don't know. I didn't do anything with biology. I'm not very good at that. HTML elements are formatted as such. And this is what I was talking about, that you have the open, you use these sideways carets, these pointy brackets, and you say whatever the tag is in this instance, H1 stands for headline 1, and then you put the text, you put the content between it, and then you always want to make sure you have this closing tag. That is the part that usually messes people up the most, and that you have to go through and make sure that you always have a closing tag. Don't worry, Glitch has what we call a linter that is kind of like spell check in a Word document, except for it's for code. So it will tell you if it's not working. So we also have elements. When we talk about them, they can be semantic or non-semantic. And when I say semantic, I'm referring to things like header, main, footer. If you look at your index HTML that I have provided, you'll see that we do have a header, we have a main, and we have footer. You can kind of assume what the header is going to do. It's probably the header. The main is the main part, and the footer is down at the bottom. And compared to that, we have non-semantic elements, which are things like H1, headline 1, and that we actually go H1 through H6, and it gets a little bit smaller and a little bit less important each time. P tag, which is paragraph, IMG for image, and A, which is anchor tag, which is how we do links. If you want to link to a URL, you do an A tag. That's also one of the ones that trips people up the most, because you don't think link A, you're going to think it's link something else, like with an L, but that's something completely different. So let's go back to our index HTML. And in here, we have an HTML starting tag. As you can see, it highlights the closing tag for you. So that helps you with it. That it will, you can always figure out where the start and the end of your element is because it will highlight it. We have HTML, and then we have head here, which is where I say it's kind of like the brain of this body analogy that I'm going for. That we put important things in here, but they aren't things you're really going to see on the screen. These are, for example, here, this is how we connect our CSS style sheet, and here is how we connect the JavaScript to it. So these are things that are very important, but they're kind of what is happening under the hood that we don't need to see it. I'm going to just close the head for now because we're going to mainly deal with the body. And the body is where all of our main content on screen shows up. So again, you can see bodies, we have a starting tag and a closing tag. Whenever we have that slash, we call it the closing tag. There is a couple of things that can be self-closing, which we do have one of those on screen that I will talk to you about in a moment. But for the most part, you always have an opening and a closing. So here I have my header, and then I have H1, which is my headline, and it says quarantine fun jar. If you click show, you can either preview it next to the code and see it, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to do show in a new window. Oh my. There we go. It did not want to apply any of the styles I had for a minute. Okay, so where do we think this header is based on what we've looked at? Anyone?
In the head?
In the head, but where in it? Looks like we have the top. Yes. Good job, Mike Morris. So the top, this blue part where it says quarantine fun jar, that is our header, and we have a headline of quarantine fun jar. Going further down, we have main. The main part of ours involves the H2, which H2 is headline 2. It means it's like a title, but it's less important than H1, and it's a little bit smaller. And it is what is going in our fun jar today. We then have an input where we're saying it is a text. We're giving it an ID and a name. And an ID is another way that we can add that we can specify something important in our HTML. So we have a regular input, and this becomes more important when we get into CSS and JavaScript, but we can also have classes or IDs. I have a class here on this H2 because I'm trying to say this one is different than the H2 that says what is going in our fun jar today. This is our options list where all the options are going to show up underneath it. So a class and ID are just ways that we can put a little bit more importance on an element. And when we use an ID, we only want to use that ID once. So I will have only one ID of add options. I will have only one of jar input. And that class, we could put it on multiple ones. I've only put it on one here, but we can think of it as every person in here would be part of the crash course class. We could assign each of us a class of crash course, but I would have an ID of Liz. Catherine would have an ID of Catherine, and we would go on from there. So that you can think of it that we are all part of one class, but we each have our own ID. And then you can get all philosophical about it if you want. Okay, so we have a button with an ID of add options. We have another button with an ID of random selection. These are important. Everything with an ID is very important in this because it means that it is something we are going to use when we get to JavaScript. Okay. We also have an image. I said that we had one on here that has a closing tag of its own, and that is image. Images are self-closing. And then down here we have the footer. And if we look at it, we can see where the main and the footer's down here in the bottom, and it's orange. Or technically that color is coral. So let's add a little bit to this. I've put in notes throughout all of it on all the pages of suggestions of things we can do. So the first thing I want to do is up here, I want to add a P tag. I want to add a paragraph that explains what the fun jar is. So some sort of like rules, suggestions, what to do. So I'm going to start with opening up a tag with an open P. And if you look, glitch is really handy because it self-closes it for you. So I'm going to put in here quarantined and not sure what to do. Have no fear. The quarantine fun jar is here. Okay, so I've just put a little bit in there. And if you look, I now have a P tag. That's pretty small. We're going to change it up when we get to CSS in a minute. But that's just getting us started. I'm going to add another P tag under that. And I'm going to say, enter some activities. And then click select random activity. And let the fun jar choose what you do. And I'm going to go and hit format this file. This is another reason why I like glitch. I enjoy all the confetti, but also it makes it look really nice and cleans it up for you. However, if you do have any issues with it, it will not format that file for you. So it's also very good to find out where you might have something wrong in here. Okay. So looking back at my fun jar starter, I now have these two. That looks pretty good. Let's make, I have a note in here of let's link the image to SDG's website with an anchor tag. So we are going to apply a link around the image because you can also nest things. So right here I have everything sitting within main, but I can also nest an image within a link. So I can do A, and we will do S. No, it's not SRC. What is it? Is it SRC? Catherine, help me. Why have I forgotten that?
Hold on, sorry, I'm working on the side.
It's not, it's
It's
href.
href.
That's it. I knew. I was like, no, it's not SRC. This is what happens when you start live coding, is that you blank on something you do every day. Href equals, and we will just do https://www.suncoast.io. And then we will close it. So now we have opening and closing, and just to show us that we've worked it, we're just going to put Suncoast right in there. So now I have a link that says Suncoast, and it takes us to the SDG website. But I want it that when I click on this picture, it's going to take us to it. So I'm actually going to take away Suncoast, hit enter, and then I am going to copy that image and format that file. So now if I go to my fun jar, I no longer have that link that's showing, but it still works. Now it's the image that is actually acting as our link to another page. How are we doing so far?
Can I see the code on how much you copied from the source?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
So it's just, I copied this whole image. You need to make sure you have, because it's self-closing, so we have to make sure we have it in here. And let me tell you a little bit about how you add images if you want to add an image. Because you can customize this and you can do whatever you want with Glitch. You don't have to keep it as an SDG one. I'm just going with it. So we have in assets. This is a little bit different, and this is because we are using an online editor. But you would click on asset, you would upload an asset. And let's see. Trying to make sure I pick out a somewhat appropriate one. Because y'all don't need to see my husband dressed up as George R. R. Martin. That doesn't need to be uploaded. But that's one of the pictures I have there. So I'll upload a picture of my cats. So I have Gizmo, Gadget, and it's a JPEG. If you click on it, once you've uploaded it, it gives you a link. I'm going to copy that link. And I'm going to show you that we could go to this link in its own tab if we wanted to. So this link is now up on the internet. That as long as this project exists, we can go to it. But we are going to copy that. We are going to go to the HTML. And if you want to add an image, I'm going to add this as a second image. So IMG. This is where you do SRC, which stands for source, because you're saying, where's the source of the image? And you put that link in there. If you already have it hosted somewhere, you could just link to where it's hosted. You don't have to upload it to Glitch. This is just a picture of my cats that I have on my computer. I mean, it's hosted in various places already on Glitch because I've uploaded it many times, but you get the point. And you always want to make sure you have what we call an alt tag. That's alternative text. And this is where you want to describe it. This is something that if your link, if the image ever breaks the hosting, if it breaks, the alternative text will show up. It's also good for if you are doing SEO.
Person accessibility.
Accessibility, yes, it is accessibility as well as search engine optimization. That if someone, if you want to make sure that someone with perhaps who is using a screen reader or might need some sort of help accessing your website, alt text is very good for that. It makes your site accessible. You're less likely to get sued. And it's also good for search engine optimization. Obviously, because we are just hosting things on Glitch right now, we're not really worrying about search engine optimization, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind. Oh, so I will say gadget or fluffy cats on a pink chair, giving it slightly descriptive. I close it. And now I have an image on there. So if you want to, I've added some styling. We're going to go over that in the CSS in just a moment. But so mine's coming in small. If you put yours in, it might come in very big if you change the styling, but we'll do that in a moment. I'm going to actually comment this out. So I'm going to say command / so it no longer shows up on my fun jar. All these comments that you see and all these little notes, those are from doing command /. Okay. So now that we've done a little bit with HTML, there's tons of elements and tags you can use. And I suggest just playing around, but I've given you quite a bit here. You can do headlines, you can do a button, you can do an input, you can put an image, you can put text, you can do all sorts of things with it. We're going to move to CSS. So what is CSS? This is the one I sometimes like to trick people. Sometimes actual developers will sometimes forget what CSS or HTML stands for. But CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And it allows us to make a website look how we want it to. I say working with CSS is making things look pretty. If I have to do a task, I actually did that today. I had to write out a task on this project I'm working on, and I had to give it so many hours, and I said, make it look pretty, AKA I'm doing my CSS on it. If we are going back to that analogy that HTML is the skeleton, I say that CSS is the skin, the eyes, the fingernails, the hair, all of that. That is CSS. And it's also a way to apply styles to your website, both globally and singularly. Before CSS, you could style just through HTML, but you had to make everything have that same styling if you wanted it to look the same. Whereas now we can say, hey, we could go in and say, I want every image to be this height, which is why when you saw me put in that extra image, it stayed about the same size as the other one because I said, I only want my images, all images are going to be this size. Whereas if I hadn't done that, I would have to inline style each one individually. So also the biggest thing is that CSS is a set of rules. And we write these rules by referring to an element by its name, ID, or class. So that's why I brought up that we do have some IDs and classes, and they become more important later on. So each rule will feature a property and a value. And a property could be background color, font size, color. Color is for the text color. It can be font weight. It could be actual height, width, text shadow. There's all sorts of different things. There are like 300 different properties you can add, over 300 CSS properties. So we're not going to even touch we're just doing a drop of CSS in this one. And after you do a property, you do value. So that would be a name of a color or size of font or the kind of shadow you wanted on it or the actual height. And you set it up like this. So you say the element, property, and value. And you have to have those curly braces. So an example would be if I wanted my H1 to have a font color of red, I would say H1, curly braces, color, colon, red, and there should be a semicolon actually at the end of that, I apologize, and then a curly brace. So let's now move to our style CSS. And here's our files are adding styling rules to your content. I've added quite a bit. So I've done a lot of the formatting to kind of put it in there, but one of the as you can see, we have a set of colors that you can actually name. So we can go, I did not include a link to it, but you can either do CSS colors, and we have loads here, tons of options. You definitely have most of your basic color names that you can name. Like there's purples, pinks, various grays, greens, green, yellow, all sorts of different ones. Or what I'm suggesting we do, and if you want to go to up here at the top, I'm saying let's pick a new color theme from this site called colorhunt.co. So I'm just going to copy that. And I'm going to go right in here. And I love this site because it gives you a whole bunch of colors that look pretty dang good together. So I'm going to pick a new one. And what is calling to me today? Let's do this one. This looks like fun. Okay, so here we have a hex code, and a hex code is another way that you can, one of the many ways you can call a color. You can do it by RGB, there's hex. What's the other one? Is it SCS? I can't remember. I hardly ever use that one. Or you can do, if you want one of the predetermined names, you can do it that way. So I'm going to go in here. So I have my color hunt colors. I'm going to copy this blue and I'm going to put a comment. So I'm going to say, we'll say the blue color. And I'm doing this so that I don't have to jump around as much later on. I'm going to copy this purple color. Oh, as you can see, I was playing around with colors last night. That was when I was picking out colors for my slides. As you can see, big fan of this site. Purple. We'll do this pink. And you don't have to do this if you don't want to. This is just how I'm making sure that I, as I said, don't have to jump around. We'll just call it the light color. Okay, so I'm going to actually open this up next to it because at this point we can kind of like figure out what's going on with this. We want to see it really quickly when it happens. Okay, so I'm going to start with my background color. I'm going to change it to this light one. So you have to always have that hashtag or octothorpe. And as you can see, my background color has already changed. I'm now going to go into my header. So I was using a different blue color. Let's do pink for this one. Ooh, that's fun. This is very bright. I like bright colors. You can find more subtle ones if you'd like to. And let's make the text purple. So in here for the main, I've said I want everything in main. The font color is going to be coral. So now I'm going to say I want it to be this purple. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Why would my buttons appear half of what yours show? I can't read add options. It's just half.
As
Could it
in?
be like the height is half of what I see your button is.
Oh. It might be the size of your screen because it is a little bit relative.
Okay. I'll work on that. We don't need to
Yeah.
hold the class up. I just want to ask.
Yeah, I would say you'd need to mess around in here maybe with the padding because I haven't put a specific height on it. So it might be if you've changed the font size or you could add more padding onto it. Or you could put an actual height and width on there as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're now going to do, got that purple. Let's do this blue. We're going down to our input. So I can add a border. So I've added a 5-pixel width border. I've said I want it to be dashed. And now I'm adding this blue. So it's a slightly different blue. And I'm going to make that purple. That is my color here. I'm going to make it the color of the input. So when I put in test, okay, it's all purple. And let's change the button to that pink color. We're going to keep it kind of that white background color, but we're going to change the font color. So now it's the pink, but now we're going to switch it. We have these things, these animations we can do. So when I hover, I can say button : hover, and it will switch. I have to declare it, but I've switched it. So it was coral font on a white background, but then it becomes a coral background with a white font. So I'm just going to do that slightly differently. And I'm now making it pink. And because I did not, even though they have their own IDs, I have not done anything with their IDs in the CSS. I'm saving that for the JavaScript, but it changed both of them because I'm calling the HTML element. So it is going to add the same styling to every HTML element with that same tag. So that's why it's really kind of nice that I'm like, I want all my buttons to look the same. I want all my font to look the same. I want all of this to do the same. And the last but not least, let's do that blue color for the footer. So I need to make sure I put the hashtag, or it's called an octothorpe. And there we go. Slightly different color scheme. I'm going to leave that weird little kind of coral. I kind of like it. I kind of like it as the text shadow there. But let's also do a little bit more. Let's make the H1, I want that centered, right? So let's say we're going to add a different property this time. And that property is text align. If I can spell, I need you all to keep me in check when it comes to spelling. I often mistype. So I have text align. I could say right, and now it's all aligned to the right. If I left it at left, that's how I was doing it before, but I want it as center. And I want it to have a little bit more padding. This is how it would look closer on my phone. And I'll show you in a little bit. We can actually see how it's going to look on a phone. So I'm going to add a little bit more padding here. And padding is a way we can add space between the outer element and the inside, the content. So I'm saying padding, and let's do 10 pixels. So because I've added that 10 pixels, I've added it to the top, the bottom, the right, and the left. It's kind of had to shrink it in. So now Quarantine Fun Jar is, it's on 2 lines, but it's quarantines on 1 line and Fun Jars. You all can see what I'm doing. You know what I'm talking about. Okay. So let's add a little bit more spacing also between today, the activity for today, and the image. So as you can see, I have done something different. I did for my padding up above, I did 10 px. Px stands for pixels. I can also do rem, that's a ratio. And I'm saying, hey, 10 rem, it's going to be different than 10 pixels. If I did 10 pixels, that's going to be really small, right? So it's kind of saying relative to the height of everything, I want it to be 10. But let's add a little bit of a margin. And a margin puts space between the outside and the border, wherever the border would be. This is called the box model. This is getting a little bit more advanced, but we can play around with that to make it look a little bit better. So now I'm saying, hey, I want more space between the outside versus the inside of my area, of my element, my HTML element. And I'm going to just say 10 pixels on this. So just adding a little bit more. And let's do 50. There we go. That looks pretty good, right? I could also say if I just want the height, the top bottom, I can do 50 pixels and then a 0. And it's saying it's only going to add it to the top and bottom, and the left and right are going to be left at 0. Okay, so we have a bunch of different things in here. Feel free to mess around with them. You can do, as I have font weight here, you can make it bolder if I want it to be really bold. You're not seeing a huge difference right now with that. You can also make it thinner. You can make it it's light or normal, I believe. Let's see, what else do I have in here? You can play around with widths. If I took off this width on the footer, you would see it adds a margin. So that's why I'm saying I want certain things to be 100% width. But we've got hover, that's always a fun effect. We've got the border there. We've got my instructions. Let's actually make those instructions a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go here. And I'm going to say for both p tags, I want font size. Let's do 20 pixels. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. What do you think? It's a little bit big, but it'll be fine. Okay. Let's leave that for now. Okay. So we've messed around with some CSS. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. Let's get into some JavaScript. But actually, before I do that, I'm going to show you one more thing you can do. Because I've mentioned how IDs and classes can be used, let's go into this and let's call random selection. So I've named the second button has an ID of random selection. And let's say I want to add slightly different. I don't want it to be pink and white. Maybe I want it to be pink and want to try that blue. I can come in here. And if I want to call the ID, I have to do the hashtag. I have to do the octothorpe. And then I say random selection. Okay. And now I'm going to say that I want the color to be, now I got to find that purple color. I made all of my font that. So color. So now random selection is purple no matter what. Okay, maybe not the best styling option, but that's the one we're going to go with for right now. That I can say if I don't want both my buttons to be exactly the same, I can give it an ID and call it. If I wanted to call a class, I have an options list. And to call it by the class, I would need to put a period in front of it. So I can say font size 16 pixels. Unfortunately, we haven't done any, or no, we do have it there. So you can see now it's shrunk down. Even though it's an H2 as all the other ones, I have now made it a little bit smaller. And I think that's fine. That's a decent user experience for right now because the options aren't as important necessarily as what's going into our jar and the actual activity. We know what we're putting in there. So now, the meat and potatoes. We're going into the JavaScript. How are we doing on CSS? How are we feeling? I saw a thumbs up. Okay. So JavaScript. I always like to start with JavaScript is not Java. You get that a lot. People go, oh, you know JavaScript. Oh, can you build me an Android app? And I go, no, that's Java. No, it's the same. No, it's very much not the same. Oh, ooh, went a little too far there. Well, now all my slides are messed up. Anyways, it is a client-side language. When we talk about web development, we have a server side and a client side. The server side is what's on the servers. The client is what you are seeing on your computer. It is the muscle of a website. So we have the skeleton of HTML. We've got the skin, hair, eyes for the CSS, and now we have the muscle of the website. It was originally called LiveScript and created in 1995. And I also like to tell people it was created in a week, 10 days, roughly a week. And I like to do that because I had a poor backend dev who only knows C#. and he's trying to learn some JavaScript, and he went to me and he's like, Liz, that's stupid. Why does it do that? And I go, look, look, look. It is not us to question why JavaScript does what it does. It was written in a week. We just accept it and move on. He did not like that answer, but I thought it was pretty funny. Well, seeing him get all mad was pretty funny. But JavaScript also allows us to reuse code. So as you can see, a lot of this, again, like CSS, what makes it so great is that we can reuse it, because before, why is everything going crazy? Before we had everything broken out this way, if you wanted something to happen, you couldn't reuse code. You had to do it very explicitly to the HTML. So JavaScript allows us to be able to say, hey, on every page that has this button, I want this action to happen. And it makes it really easier. So you're not having to do everything and make it monotonous and repetitive. So we also have these variables. These are the big parts that we're going to be talking about with JavaScript today. Variables, this gets a little bit mathy. They're values passed into a program. It's anything with a const or let in front of it. And there are many different types of variables. We have numbers. We have strings, which are kind of like words, or they can even be numbers, but they come into, they're put into quotes, and they're strings. They're different things. We have arrays. We're going to be dealing with arrays today, and those are a list. Also, functions falls into this, and it is a set of statements that performs a task, or you can think of it as directions for the computer. Okay, so we're going to go look at our JavaScript. So we come over here, script.js, and I'm actually going to close this because when we get this going, we're going to have it on a separate screen. So let me actually don't need my cats. Let's show this in a separate window. We're going to do that and that. And we'll see in a second, because I'm going to open this up and we're going to go into the browser. So I have a couple of different things here written. We've started with, I have created variables to identify two buttons. I have a lot of notes in here. I know it might look overwhelming, but these comments I have in there are another way so that you can understand what I am saying. Sometimes reading it might be more useful, and I've laid out exactly what we're doing. So first I have variables to identify the two buttons. So I created a variable. This is kind of where it gets, like I said, it gets a bit mathy, and you have to think of it, if you remember, like in algebra or math class, when you had to do something where you had x equals 5, and then you had to say what 3x was. You know, what 3 times x, that's 15, because x was 5. So this is the same way of, we're saying, hey, here's a variable and this is what it means. And that if we call this at any other point, we're still calling what it says back at the beginning. So if you had something that said in this problem, x equals 5 and y equals 3, well, x was always going to be 5 in that math problem, right? Don't worry, you don't have to be good at math at this. I'm a child of mathematicians, so unfortunately, math is part of it for me. Anyways, so we have an add button, and I have said, hey, go into the document. Now the document is here. It's everything that you see on the actual browser screen. And I'm saying, hey, go into the document. I want you to query, aka look for, a selector, an HTML tag, or a ID, or a class. Find the selector. And in this one, it says, find the selector with add options. So it's going to go through, and it's saying, hey, JavaScript, go all the way through until you find on the HTML something that has an ID of add options. So this button has add options as its ID. And I've said, every time I say add button, that is the button I'm talking about. No other button but that button. This is why IDs are very important. I've done another one where I've said, hey, I want another variable named a random button. I want you to go into that document. I want you to query, look for a selector that says ID random selection. So it's going to random selection right here. That's the one I gave that ID to. And it says that is random button. Every time you refer to random button, you are referring to that. So this is important because we're now going to skip to the bottom of this, where I'm attaching a method called add event listener. We have methods in JavaScript. We have certain things that are built into JavaScript for us so that we don't have to build everything out. This makes it a lot easier, and it's built into the language. It's what makes JavaScript JavaScript. So I'm saying, hey, on that add a button, I want you to add an event listener, which means I want this button, I want this document and this button to listen for a click. So it's saying, hey, every time you click it, I want you to run this function called create array. We'll get to the function part in a second. Then I'm saying, hey, random button, I want to add an event listener to you. I want this button to listen for a click. And when it says click, I want you to run the function select random activity. So now let's bust open this browser and see what's going on when we click these. So if you want to hit Option Command J, and it's slightly different with Windows, and I cannot remember it right now. So do what I do and just start pressing everything between Control, Option, Windows, Command, something, and a J, and eventually you'll hit that button. I was working on a Windows computer for a while, and that's kind of how I had to do everything. So we'll go up to that first one. We said add options. We want to run create array. So we have a function here. We're saying, hey, create array. And I want this function that's going to create an array or a list. So whenever I say array, I mean a list. But when I say array, I'm talking about what's going on under the hood, the JavaScript part. And when I say list, I'm going to talk about what the user sees. So we're going to have two different sections going on here. I want to read the value we type into the input. So I click this and nothing shows up. Yes, thank you, Matthew. You can also right mouse click and select inspect and then go over to console. So you might open it. If you click inspect, you get to see this is where you can do this on every website out there. You can open up and see the actual HTML. You can also see the CSS. So you can actually go in and say, hey, I really like how they did this really cool button thing. Let me see what they did. How did they style it? What font are they using? What are they doing here? You can go in and be super duper nosy, but you'll want to be on console for JavaScript. And I have that we have const input value. So I'm saying document.query selector input.value. So I'm saying I want to make another variable called input value. And I want you to go into the document, query until you find something that's an input. And because there is no octothorpe or period in front of it, input is the HTML tag. So it goes till it finds input, and then I want it to do .value. So I'm saying the input value is whatever value we put in here. And then I pass it to create list, which console logs. I'm showing you this because now if I put in puzzle, whenever we do console.log, we are saying, hey, log this in the console. And the console is this part that we have opened up that kind of goes under the hood of the browser. And every browser has this, at least every browser I've used. Yes, they all have it. So now I can see puzzle. I can change that and I can make it coding challenge. Let's say coding challenge is one of them. And it's popping in because I've said this create list function that I have called within a function is printing out coding challenge. But we want it to show up on the screen. We need to do something with it. We want it to actually be there. So this function takes the input value and makes it visible to the user. That's why I'm saying whenever it's to the user, we're calling it a list. Whenever it's to the computer, we're calling it an array. But an array and a list are basically the same thing. So first we need to create a new element. So again, we have some methods that are built in. So to create a new element, we're going to do const new element. And it's going to go a little crazy over here in my console because it's automatically updating every time I type something in. And I'm going to say, hey, document. Instead of query selector, we're going to create an element. And I want it to be a p tag. It's going to be a paragraph tag. Okay. So now I have a new element. And now I can go in. I want to have that element's text content say what the input value is. So I have passed the input value in here. So now I can say new element. Every element has text content as a property on it. And I just say simply equals input value. So I'm saying, hey, I've created this new element, and now I want that element to say its text value to be input value. I've been very explicit with the words I'm using here as well, if you haven't noticed already. So the next thing I'm going to do is number 3 is append the element to the element with the class options list. So we go back to document.querySelector, document.querySelector, and then we say this time, because it's going to a class, we put the period, options list. And as I said append. So append means add it after it. There's also a prepend, which would go in front of it, but we're going to append child new element. Okay, so let's see. Boom, we have it showing it up now right here under today's options. So puzzle, learn to code, board game. Awesome. Well, now I've got board game on there twice. Maybe I really, really want to play a board game tonight. Okay, so I have something in here. I have built out a select random activity. Remember, I assigned that to my random selection button. I said, hey, when I click that, I want to do something. I want it to run select random activity. So I hit this, and I'm console logging these 2 brackets. That is how you signal an array. And because they're empty, it means there is nothing in it. So I have an array, but I haven't put anything into the array. But I am console logging it. And I have a random index here, which is, we'll come back to that later. So first I want to add something to my array. I need to push what I write from my input, not just onto the visible list, but on the array that the computer can use to randomly select from. So we're going to go back up to create array. Right up here, I have a note that says, let options equals the empty brackets. So I'm saying, hey, we're going to create a variable, but it's a variable that's going to change, which is why we're saying let instead of const. Const stands for constant. This is something that's not changing. I mean, you can change it by different things, but it's not really like these functions. Create array is always going to be create array. Input value will always be that input value. The actual value might change, but it's always going to refer to the input value. But my options, I'm going to push it and change my array. It's not going to just be this empty array. I'm going to add to it. So I'm saying let. I could say const. For vanilla JavaScript, it doesn't really matter, but I like to explain that this is something that's going to change. Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. When it started saying reconnecting, I got worried that I had lost internet in the middle of this. So as long as that's still going, that's good. Okay, so I have the create array, which all it's doing right now is creating the input value and then pushing it down to create lists so we can display it. But I want to actually push that into options. So I keep saying push, and that is because we have a JavaScript method that we can do to arrays where we actually push something into it. So I am saying here, we're going to say options dot push input value. Okay. And I'm going to actually console.log options. I console.log it down in random selection, but I want to make sure things are working. This is called a sanity check. I'm just making sure it's still all going in there. So now I will say play a board game. Boom. I now have an array. Notice that arrays start with 0. They don't start with 1. They start with 0. So I have play a board game. It's on the list and the array. So let's learn to code. Boom. Now I have 2 things in my array, 0 and 1. Okay. And these indexes, which are the 0 and 1 that I show up, are very important because if I wanted to call a specific one, I would put options. So as you can see, I can type in here, hey, because I've created this variable, I can now call it in my console. So I called options, but let's say I want learn to code. I put the index. So whatever it shows up here, 0, 1, and we can carry on 2, 3, 4, that's what's going to show up. That's how I call it. So let's do another one, play guitar. So now let's say I want options 2. There is also another thing we have that is much like push for array, is that we have options.length. And this is important because it tells us how long the length is, how many things we have in it. So we now have our array. It's pushing it to options. So now let's try back down here, the select random activity. If I random selection, I have, it's console logging, it's logging to the browser console, options. So here's my array of options, and then options.length. So it's telling me what is in it and how long it is. Now these are important because we need to find a random index number based on the options.length. Now I've already built this out for you, and I have it here. I have another variable that is the random index. And I built this out because math.floor and math.random are also not methods. They are built-in parts of JavaScript where math.random will give you a random number. I'm going to clear this. Everything is still saved, but I'm just clearing my console and showing you math.random. If I type it in here, it gives me a random number, but it's always a random number between 0 and 1. Thank you for stopping by, Shane. So we have math.random, but 0 to 1, that doesn't work when I have 3 options, right? I need a number between 1 and 3. So I'll do math.random, and let's say right now it's times 3. So now it's always giving me a random number, but now it's going up to 3. Still not quite, it's giving me like anything up to 3, which isn't going to work because my indexes don't have decimals, and it's always going to give me a decimal because that's how it works. If you multiply a decimal by a whole number, you're always going to have something with a decimal. So now we have math.floor, and math.floor actually rounds it down. So we also have a math.ceiling that you can round this number, this decimal number, it'll round it up or it'll round it down. Math.ceiling, ceil, C-E-I-L, will round up. Let's actually set a variable so we can see that. So let's do const random number equals, and we'll say math.random times, we'll say 24 for this. Okay, so now I say random number, and it's giving me 11.44. So since I've declared it as a variable, I've said at this very exact moment, whatever that random number is, multiply it by 24. That's my random number. That is it. until I do something to change it. So it's 11.44. Now if I did math.floor random number, it rounds it down to 11. And if I do math.ceil random number, it rounds it up to 12. So I'm rounding it down because I never want it to be above. If I get like a certain number, it can screw it up because it needs to be below 3 right now because I only have 3 options. So in here, I have actually laid it out as we are doing all of that math that it's doing for us, because trust me, we don't want to have to figure out that math and do it. If JavaScript wants to give it to us, let's take it. So I am saying our random index is going to be math.floor, math.random times options.length. So that's why I said knowing how long the array is very important. So we're going to do board games. Let's do puzzles. Let's do guitar. Let's do painting. Okay, so I've got 4 things. I have it that it's printing all of this off. So now I hit random selection and it's saying 0. If I hit it again 0, come on. Random index, this time I got a 3. So it's obviously, this is how I get it to give me a whole number between 0 and 4. Okay. So now that we need to retrieve the option in the array by its index number. So I've declared what the random index is. And we can say, instead of this console log random index, we're going to say const selected activity equals options. And to call that, I say, hey, options is an array, go into this random index. So I put it between the brackets. And we will console.log that select, we'll call it selected activity. Okay, so let's put a bunch of stuff in there again. Let me actually take out, let's take out a couple of this console log of the options. Let's kind of make it a little cleaner for us. And we'll say puzzles, board games, learn to code, and thank you for coming, Missy. What else?
Eat pizza.
Eat pizza, that's a good one. I dance, so I've been dancing. We'll say workout. So we've got a couple, right? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 6 things in here. Beer, drink beer. Yes, I'll just put beer. Okay. So now when I hit random selection, it should print out selected activity. And it says, here's all of them. We have a length of 7 and we have selected board games. If I do it again, dance. If I do it again, learn to code. So now we have it. It's showing up on the console, but how many of you like to go and find things out via the console? Probably not many. So we want it to actually show up on screen. So we are going to do another one of these text contents, and I've already started it. So I have document.querySelector. I say, hey, go in until you find an ID of today. So it goes all the way in. Today, I have labeled this one, this whole section as today, as an ID of today. And I'm saying, hey, change that text content to the activity for today is. And here we are going to do at the end, this is a string. So I said there's a lot of different types of variables. And a string is how we would put in different words, different phrases, anything that you don't want it to change. If I put it in mathy, like if numbers are in there and you don't have them in quotes, like it's going to do whatever the math it's going to do. So I'm saying, hey, I want it to always say this activity, or the activity for today is, and then I'm going to put a plus, and then I'm going to put selected activity. Okay, we ready to try this? So puzzles, board games, learn to code, beer, dance, guitar. Okay, and now random selection. Today we are playing the guitar. Or we can dance if we really don't want to play guitar. Or we can learn to code. Now all of this, because I'm doing it in JavaScript, all of this will stay. These options will all stay until I hit refresh. As you've seen, every time I've changed something in the code, it refreshes it automatically. So that is the one thing that we're not doing, is that if I accidentally close this, I've lost it. But if we refresh it, we're back at the beginning. So now we have created an app. It is heavylittle-carpet.glitch.me. If you want to, you can send that out to people, but we've done something in an hour and a half. We have built a whole app. Do we have any questions? Did you enjoy yourself? Did you learn something?
Hey, Liz, I have a question.
Yes.
So could you set it up to, as you were typing what was going in the fun jar, for that font, once you hit add it, to disappear so you didn't have to go back and...
Yes, yes, that is something I have in here that I kept forgetting to add in here. So we want to go back up to where we're messing around with that input value. So create array is where I've declared what an input value is, right? And then I just pass it down. So if I wanted to, let's actually format that, make it a little more user-friendly. After I push it and I create the list with the input value, I can go in here and do document.querySelector input.value equals, and just put an empty string. So I put 2 quotes and I just say it's an empty string. And now it disappears at the end of it.
That was easy.
Yep. I also have another little tidbit if y'all want. Okay. Let's say we want it to be that like I can hit enter. And I don't want it to just be that I have to click. So add event listeners can be a lot of different things. So I'm going to first say, let's create one more array or one more function that will be const on enter pressed. So I'm saying when I hit enter equals, we're going to pass in an event. So we're listening for that event and now we're passing in that event. This is pretty advanced here, so but I'm just showing y'all that we're saying if event.keycode equals is 13. So I'm actually putting in a lot of different things here. I'm doing an if statement as well as I am doing comparative logic here, but I'm saying, hey, if the event will have a key code, and if that key code is 13, because 13 is for enter. Don't ask me why, I just looked it up. I don't know. Something about keyboards. I will say event.prevent default, because I'm saying, hey, don't like do anything ridiculous. All I want you to do is to run that whole create array. So I'm saying, hey, if I hit this button, so I'm saying specifically if I hit enter and not if I hit space or anything else like that. And now I can come down here and say, hey, document.querySelector, have that input. I want that input to listen for key down. And then I'm going to say, hey, when that key down happens on event, or I want you to pass that event to on enter pressed event. So this is how I would say if I want to do puzzle, now I can just hit enter. So that's way more advanced, but I just thought I would show you, like, this is how you do it. This is how everything you interact with on the internet, all of this is what's happening. Every time you go to an input and you hit enter, there's code for this right here. Any other questions? I'm just gonna dance. I don't know. I think this is fun. I like building things. And it's okay if you don't have any questions. Did we have fun?
Yes.
Okay, good. That's I just need one person.
Yeah. No, you know, I think given an hour and a half, you know, there was a lot of topics that were covered here. And had I not had exposure to some of these topics before, I may have been a little bit lost. I saw one of our colleagues' comments, you know, she had to go because she was a little bit over her head, and I can appreciate that. But thankfully, you know, that there's been a lot of exposure to some of these topics for myself, and so you know, I was able to kind of follow along. There was a couple of things I learned kind of along the way, so that was really good. I'm super beginner, super brand new at this. Not even sure I can make a career out of it just yet, because that's not the career I'm in. But you know, given the world we live in today, you know, this kind of thing is you know, maybe something everybody should learn, because the work from home web development kind of stuff is going to be much needed, as well as the, you know, the folks that are you know, putting themselves at risk, of course. But yeah, so I appreciate you all putting this on, and I appreciate you putting this class together. So thank you.
I want everyone to know that I'm not expecting you to be like, I can whip up any website or I can do this on my own. I'm mainly just trying to show you what you can do and how much fun, and if you learn just a little bit. And JavaScript is where a lot of people stumble. HTML and CSS, it's very declarative. It's very, you have a p tag, it does paragraphs. You have an image, it does images. CSS now, there's a lot of people who are like, CSS is super easy. Most of them don't know how to actually do CSS. But, and Catherine's like, yes, she has met many of those people because she is a CSS whiz. And, you know, that's still also very declarative. There's just 300 options out there, and you just have to figure out what each one does, and like endless possibilities. JavaScript gets a little more complicated, but I just wanted to show you that it can be fun. You can build things. You can build things that you can use every day for fun. You can do it for a job. You can build amazing different things with it. So I hope at least you got that this was a fun activity, and that while this might be over your head, it's also maybe not as out of reach as you thought it was. Because that's the other thing, is I always thought, oh, I could never do that. I can't do that. Like, that's beyond me. And it's not. Like, you can do this. Anyone can do this.
You know, I think your explanation of how the document query selector and then parentheses and whatever it is we're saying, that was helpful for me, you know, because I struggled with that as far as the JavaScript side is concerned. You're right, HTML seems to be a little easier than certainly the JavaScript, and the CSS is very prescriptive, but it makes sense in my world, you know, in terms of me being very logical. It makes sense, but the JavaScript, all the me docs and document docs and all these kinds of different things, it was very confusing. But I think it was very helpful for you to describe kind of how document query selector and what that means, and you're saying, hey, here's the document, and by the way, I'm selecting, I'm asking this question of the selector, and that selector is today, and then I'm able to tie that back to, oh, that today is the ID or the class that I called out in the HTML. So that kind of tied things together for me. So I think that was very helpful.
Good, I'm glad. Catherine, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so I guess we'll wrap it up for this evening. Thank you everyone for joining us. There are some awesome resources out there for anyone that wants to kind of keep dabbling with this, playing with it. So if you want any resources, feel free to reach out to me through Meetup. I can try to send some out. I'm sure Liz has always been a great participant. So if you will reach out to her through Twitter or any other messages, she'll be able to help you too. So hopefully one day when our campus can open back up, we can host another version of this, give you all some more information, but otherwise we'll try to do some more online events to kind of give you different topics. But thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you all had fun, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.